Are Christians hypocrites? Yes, they are. But they are hypocrites to the extent of the culture to which they live in any given time frame. You see, Melchizedek makes the point that most of these Christians are doing things that are outside of the teachings of their Bible, where their Bible says in Paul, well, with Paul's writing, saying that women are to keep silent in churches and to not usurp the authority of men, was mentioned twice in the Bible. I think one in Ephesians and the other one was in 1 Corinthians. But it also is a contradiction to some of the other things that were written by Paul or students of Paul, which were things like your sons and daughters will prophesy, and women also being known as apostles within the writings of Paul. So Paul himself contradicts some of his own writings when he's talking about Ephesians and Colossians, which is why many people will say that he was only speaking to the church in Ephesia and he was only talking to the church in Corinth. But I say Colossians, but it's Corinthians, and the churches in Corinth. And that's who all he was talking to. That is not for, it wasn't a widespread thing that he was indicating that women shouldn't, because of his own contradictions in the Bible. But many people will pick and choose which ones fit their narrative. Now, I don't know if Melchizedek is a Hebrew Israelite. It seems like it, but I'm not going to say that he is because I don't know. But I know that in that culture, that women are to be submissive to men and not teach a man or have authority over a man, and so on and so forth. So it may be your own liking that you choose that one and ignore where Paul is saying the complete opposite of women being silent in the churches. But the hypocrisy comes because of cultural norms and cultural differences. When you are living in a Western culture where in today's world, women have just as much right to be leaders, women have just as much right to run countries, women have just as much right to be pastors, women have just as much right to be anything. Just as Paul said, they're deaconesses, that women will be deaconesses in the church, and you can't be a deaconess and be silent and have no authority. But when you go to other cultures, some cultures in Africa where it is still very patriarchal, then you're going to have that stand. That people are going to stand on that. People are going to believe on that, because those are the parts that that they choose to live by, because it fits the narrative of their culture. Whereas in a Western culture, it doesn't fit the narrative. So the hypocrisy is really based on the culture to which a person is living in. But if Christians or anyone who believes in this book were truly non-hypocritical, then you would follow some of the Old Testament laws, rites, and rituals. Because if you read your Old Testament in Deuteronomy, Numbers, Leviticus, and Exodus, it repeatedly says that the laws, statutes, commandments are to be perpetual for all times. So you should be doing all the high holy days. You should be sacrificing animals. And I have yet to meet a Hebrew Israelite that sacrificed animals. You should not be touching anything that a woman on her cycle touches. You should be okay with debt slavery, and you should be okay with foreigners being put into chattel slavery as well. So if you're going to talk about hypocrisies, then you have to look at your own backyard, man. I'm not trying to be negative towards you, not at all. I understand that you are a person who seeks out information, but we can't throw stones and hide your hand, because no one that I have ever come across literally follows this book to the T. Whether you are a follower of just the Old Testament, or you are a follower of the Old Testament and the New Testament, or as some are just followers of the New Testament. Even those followers of the New Testament do not follow it to a T, because it does not conform to our modern day societies. So all believers of this book are hypocrites if you're not following the entire book in the way that the book is written. And if you're implementing your own cultural understandings, then you are deciphering it incorrectly, which is one of the reasons why I walk away from this book, because I have more morality than this book has. I do not believe we should genocide our enemies. I do not believe that women are property and should be sold off to whoever pays the bride price that I came to an agreement with as a father. I do not accept animal sacrifices. Just many of those things. If a person, I don't care who a person decides that they want to have sex with, as long as they're consenting adults, it actually has no bearing on my life. Now, when those people try to force their way of thinking into my way of thinking, then I have a problem with them. Go do what you do. As long as you're not harming me, do what you do. As long as you're not harming others, do what you do. Because I'm not going to force everybody to believe in this book. The hypocrisy of it is to say that, well, the Indus people should be forced to do what we do. The people of Africa should be forced to do what we do. The people of the Americas should be forced to do what we do. The people in Australia, the Aboriginals, should be forced to do what we do. That no one should be able to have their own beliefs and their own religion. And I believe that everybody in the world deserves the rights to have their own freedom of religion or freedom of non-religion, freedom of relationship and non-relationship, even though you can't have a relationship with a fictitious character. But needless to say, everybody deserves the right of their own pursuits of life, liberty, and happiness. And no one has the right to supersede someone else's for the sake of their own. So just the idea that forcing everybody to believe what you believe in itself is hypocrisy, because for many Hebrew Israelites, I argue with them constantly about them trying to make me a Hebrew Israelite. I know my family heritage. My family heritage is not Hebrew Israelite. But they will try to force Hebrew Israelite on me simply because I'm a black man in America, in the same way that people try to force that my family was already here when I know with documentation that my family were not originally here. The overwhelming majority of my family were not already here. There are some members of my family who are native to America in my family line, but on both sides, my mother's side and my father's side. But what I refuse to accept is that I am but one thing. I am a multitude of things. I have indigenous blood. I also have African blood. I also got some Caucasian blood. So my family is very diverse, but the overwhelming majority of my blood comes from Africa. The overwhelming majority of that African blood worship Olorun, worship Mama Wata, worship the Dogons. They did not, nor have they ever worshiped Yahweh prior to coming to America, because it was forced on them. And I do not accept Deuteronomy 28 as my family heritage, because that is a gross misinterpretation. But y'all have a great day. And remember always, you have to free yourself to be yourself, because your greatness is non-negotiable. Good journey, good vibrations.